Everyone knows that George is the only boy among Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig's children, since both Peppa and Evie are girls. But what if we told you that this isn't true, and that George actually has a twin brother who is being hidden from us? Hearing problems. This might sound crazy, but there are several strange details in George's life and his family that start to make more sense when we realize he might actually have a twin brother. One of these details is the little pig's condition revealed in 2026. After so many years, we found out that he has moderate hearing loss. Even though he can hear, George doesn't hear as well as others and needs to use a hearing aid. This was a reveal that received a lot of praise from fans, since now many children with hearing problems can feel represented by George, and that's fantastic. However, did you notice that George didn't show any difficulty hearing before the episode where this was revealed? In fact, it's even said that he had already taken the test before and didn't show any hearing issues. The doctor says that this happens from time to time, but what if that explanation is only there to hide the truth, that the little pig who took this latest test is not the same one who took the previous one? What if there is someone identical to George who sometimes takes his place? In that case, only one of them has hearing problems, and we can't even say which one it is. The important thing is that we're going to convince you that this boy who looks exactly like George is really out there, and that he is far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Yeah, you didn't hear that wrong. George Pig has an evil twin. So grab your popcorn and get comfy on the couch. Another Cinewave is starting. Rebellion. Since we don't know the name of this mysterious little pig who sometimes pretends to be George, let's call him Greg Pig. You might be wondering why we're saying he's evil, and that's a very fair question, but we have our reasons for thinking that. George, most of the time, is a quiet toddler and only gets really excited when the main topic is dinosaurs. Usually, he's far from being misbehaved. The most he does is cry over pretty silly reasons, but he doesn't do it on purpose. However, there are times when he acts in a completely different way, being more aggressive and mean, like in the episode where he meets Richard Rabbit. In that story, the two of them argue several times for no good reason, just out of pure stubbornness. The worst part is when each of them builds a sandcastle, and then George destroys Richard's castle for absolutely no reason. None at all. It was completely unprovoked and something the George we know would never do. But do you know who could have done that? Greg Pig. Another time when we probably saw the evil twin in action was in the episode The Big Build, where the pig family's house is being renovated. At one point, Daddy Pig gives the disappointing news that the kids will have to move away so the machines can start the renovation, which is pretty upsetting. So it would make sense for George to start crying when he hears that, since that's what the little one usually does when things don't go his way. But what happens is the opposite. Instead of getting sad, he becomes furious and shouts, "No!" while making an angry face. We never see him confronting his parents like that, but that's exactly what happened here. See how there are moments when this quiet and respectful little pig suddenly turns into someone full of anger and disrespect? It really feels like all those times when George acts in a strange or extreme way, it's actually Greg Pig in his place. Origin. Okay, we've seen that there are indeed signs that George has a twin brother, but why do they never appear at the same time? And why does no one know Greg, to the point where he has to pretend to be George whenever he shows up? We'll tell you right now. The reason is kind of sad. Greg is clearly a very mischievous little boy, besides being George's twin. Since they both look exactly the same, no differences at all. Putting those two things together, it's possible that Greg's personality caused many problems for the Pig family, to the point where something really bad may have happened. Maybe Greg tried to take George's life out of jealousy. In that situation, Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig would have good reasons to put Greg up for adoption, because they wouldn't want to deal with such a violent child. Not because they didn't want to help him, but to keep Peppa and George safe. If that really happened, Greg would definitely have gone through psychological evaluations after being placed for adoption, and might have been diagnosed with conduct disorder, a childhood condition that can develop into antisocial personality disorder, the condition psychopaths have. It's very possible that at some point, Greg escaped from adoption and started stalking the Pig family. That's when he began replacing George in certain episodes without any of us noticing. We don't know if the Pig family is unaware of this, or if they do know what's going on and just pretend everything is fine because they're afraid of what Greg might do if they try to stop him. But tell us, us, would you also like it if the show confirmed that Greg Pig is real? If so, comment down below #Greg. Attic. Almost no one knows this, but Peppa's house isn't made up only of the rooms that appear in almost every episode, like the living room, the kitchen, and the bedrooms. There is also an attic at the top of the house, and it shows up every once in a while, like in the episode Playgroup Star. And this attic isn't one of those that stays empty. On the contrary, it's full of boxes and items. But there's something a bit strange about all of this. Most of the objects in the attic are toys. Why are there so many up there? There's no way all of them were bought for Peppa and George. If that were the case, the toys should be in their bedroom. But things start to make sense when we realize that these toys are actually for Greg, and he lives in the attic of the house. This makes it clear that at the very least, Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig know that George's evil twin has returned, to the point where they've allowed him to stay up there out of fear. In the episodes where the attic appears, you can be sure that Greg was in there, and we just couldn't see him because of the boxes. If we removed them one by one, we would eventually find a little pig identical to George at some point. Lowest score. The evidence that George's evil twin exists and is out there hasn't ended, not even close. And one of the most impressive and frightening pieces of proof appears in the episode Mummy Pig's Book, where the kids go to play on the computer. On the monitor, we can see a ranking of scores in the game. Each score is accompanied by a few letters that represent the names of different members of the pig family. PEP is Peppa, GEO is George, MMP is Mummy Pig, GPP and GNP are the initials for Grandpa Pig and Granny Pig, while SUZ is Susie. She isn't part of the family, but she visits Peppa's house all the time, so it's not surprising that her name is here. All the initials make sense, except for the last one with the lowest score, OOP. There isn't any character in the pig family with a name that matches those initials, nor anyone close enough to them who would have played on that computer. So whose score is that? It would make a lot of sense if this were Greg Pig's doing, and this set of initials might be a clue to his real name. Could his name be Otto Pig? Or does it not mean anything at all and he just typed random letters? Since Greg apparently has a rebellious personality that hates rules, this kind of behavior would fit perfectly with what we know about him. But seriously, Greg, you only scored 142 points? That's really low. Thinking about it, he probably can only leave the attic to play in the middle of the night when everyone is asleep and with the lights off so he doesn't draw attention. It must be hard to play when you're sleepy and in the dark, so maybe we shouldn't judge him for such a ridiculously low score. Power outage. Another strange event in the pig family's house that might have a darker side than it seems at first appears in the episode where the house loses power. This is something very frustrating, and nobody likes being without electricity, but the parents treat it as something completely normal that they're used to. The power going out is not a surprise at all. Could it be because the pig family sometimes doesn't pay the electricity bill? No, not at all. Peppa's parents are in a great financial situation. They buy lots of toys, travel to other countries casually, and even carry out a full house renovation without any hesitation. So what other reason could cause the power to go out so often? The answer is Greg Pig. He is always hiding somewhere in the house and could easily mess with the wiring to make his relatives lose power, just to make them suffer. Since his parents are afraid to confront him, they've gotten used to it and try to act normally until Greg decides to turn the power back on. And the detail is that the power came back right when the pig family was starting to enjoy the blackout, almost as if Greg restored the electricity after realizing it wasn't bothering them the way he had planned. The subscribe button is right there, waiting for you. How about clicking and keeping up with everything we post? Intelligence. We talked earlier about the moments when George acts differently, which end up revealing that sometimes the one on screen is his evil twin instead of him. And we notice this in other cases that go beyond situations where the little boy behaves in a malicious way, because there are also times when his intelligence changes depending on the episode. Most of the time, George is a bit slow and has trouble understanding basic things, but in other moments, he shows himself to be very smart for someone his age. One example is in the episode Ice Skating, when he suddenly starts skating like a professional skater. Another case is in the episode Musical Instruments, where the little one shows he's a master at playing the French horn. Too many toys. Besides the many toys that are in the attic, Peppa and George also have a lot of toys, far more than they should. And we're not exaggerating, because they were given a cabinet to store toys, and it ended up completely fully stuffed with so many things. Seeing this kind of thing at first makes us think that Peppa and George are simply spoiled and because of that have a lot of toys, which is true. But the truth is that a good part of the things the siblings receive aren't actually theirs, but Greg Pig's. Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig are usually fair parents, so we don't think they would just give so many presents to Peppa and George. However, it's likely that Greg Pig gets as many toys as he wants because his parents are very afraid of him and do everything they can to keep him satisfied. So yes, besides that mountain of toys in the attic, Greg is also the real owner of most of Peppa's toys and comes out of his hiding place to play with them from time to time. Is that enough to keep the Pig family safe? Or does Greg still have a plan to do something truly terrible to his relatives? The fun doesn't stop here. There are 2 amazing videos waiting for you on the screen. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.